So sub-procedures, again, the difference between a sub-procedure and a function procedure is that a function returns a value. I kept saying that all the time. I want to make sure that that sticks in your head. Okay, function must return a value. Subroutines do not. Okay, so create a new project. We'll call this one here. Okay, we'll call it what is this? Chapter 5. I'll call it sub-procedures. Okay. So chapter 5, sub-procedures. And sometimes you just hear the word procedures. That also means it's the subroutine. A function will be a function. So let me turn the property back on. And notice I turn off the other thing here, the Solution Explorer, usually up here, right? But I kind of moved that up, but you can put it back to where it was before. Okay, so the form here, I'm gonna add what should we do here? Let's see if I have an example. Okay. So procedure. Let's see if there's some example that we can use besides functions. So we know how to use function. Let's use some procedures now. Okay, so let's just say. Yeah, a really simple one. Just displays information, right? So look at like on the page 199, the examples here. Some of these examples are pretty easy, so we'll do some simple one first. I want to have here a list box. So let's add a list box here. Again, list boxes are really useful for outputting data, so you can see them easily. So let's build this list box here. And we'll call this list box just list LST output. Okay. No content. I'm just going to change the font size to 12, make it a little bit bigger as we can see. If you add text, so you see easily. And then up here, I just had another button to do something. So we have a button here, big button. And this is just the BTN, what do we call this one here? Just show, BTN show. The text would be just say show 3, example is show 3 sums, for example. The sum of three calculations of some sort. Font, we'll just put 20 here. So here it is. It's a very basic application. This is just show, BTN show, and then this is just LST output for the names. And you can make it look bigger. That's fine. Okay, so again, the event here is, in this example, only applies to the button. So the button receives the event, so that means going to double click it, okay, to get the event. The handler, it handles the button click. This is where we do some stuff. So let's just do the normal way first. Bless you. Do the normal way. I want to add just any three calculations or any arbitrary numbers here, and display the results to the list box. Okay. So we could easily do we could do like dim sum1, sum2, sum3 as we'll do just integer for now. It's easier. Okay. So let's just say that sum1 is equal to 2 plus 5. Sum2 is 3 plus 10. Sum3 is 10 plus 20. Very easy, right? And then we're gonna output those three sums to the list box. How do we do it? How do we add that to the list box? If you remember. So say lst output dot items, okay, dot add. I'm gonna add the first one, which is sum1, and each sum will be added separately to each line. Okay, so the second is the output dot items dot add sum2, and then lst output dot items dot add sum3. You can see that I'm not sure if you know some techniques, but it seems like I seem to be typing so fast because I'm using some shortcuts in here. So just so you know, as soon as you type in lst output is selected, just press the tab key. Okay, tab and then dot items tab dot add tab dot sum2 tab the out of it. Okay, so much quicker. So we output to the list box, and that's pretty much all we do here, right? So if you run, and if I click on the start and show three sums, you see those three sums right here. It's not really nice. You probably want to say 2 plus 5 is 7 and so on. So you'd be a little bit more detailed there. Okay, so let's do that. It's nicer. We say 2 plus 5 is, and then the end 7. Okay, that I think you might do it. You might even use a comma, can't you? Yeah, no, you can't. Okay, other language. You can just put a comma in the other one. So this is, I'm hard coding this. This is not really efficient. So you shouldn't really hard code this. You should put into a variable name, and then 10 plus 20. Okay. So now it's more meaningful. You see the actual numbers in there, and you see the actual. So you can do the calculation, make sure they add up correctly. Right, so this is how we normally do it. Let me just change the font size just a little bit so I can, it's a little bit hard to see still. Let me change that to, make it 20, sorry. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, much better. Okay, right, so if you think about this, you see that I read my input right here. This is reading input. At the same time, I do the processing, right? And then I output. And if you have a lot of code in here, do a lot of calculations and so forth, it's not really efficient because notice we did earlier about the radio buttons, the check boxes, and the drinks and stuff, right? I do all of that inside the one piece of code here. And it's not efficient because what you want to do is you want to break it down into subroutines or functions, and then you just call those functions a subroutine to do the job for you. Okay, so in this example, I'm going to create a subroutine to output the data. Okay, but before we do that, let's say that we have the values here. So sum, I'm going to change this here. Okay, I'm going to add some numbers. So maybe n1, n1 and 2. I'll do it one time. And 1 is 2, and 2 is 5, and 3. Well, that's fine. So and 3 is 3, and 4 is 10, and 5 is 20. So one more, right? And 6 is, let's say 30. Okay, can I do that? Yeah. Okay, so it's hard to see, but you could break it down into separate lines so you can see it better that way if you want to. That's fine too. I think that should be allowable. I guess, well, not. Okay, didn't like it. I thought you could, but maybe. Well, okay, it doesn't like it either. Okay, just took the integer out. It's understood that those are integer, but basically you would say then in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then each of those will be as integer and they assign the values. Okay, so this is just another shortcut because the data type are assigned implicitly to these values because they don't put any decimal numbers. So Visual Studio knows that these are integer. Okay. Okay, so down here then that will be just n1 plus n2, right? Okay, n3 plus n4, and then n5 plus n6. Okay, so the first one we're going to change this to what? n1. Maybe some coding here. Plus the ampersand, okay, the ampersand to concatenate those, plus n2, and then concatenate that with the equal sign, and then concatenate that again with the other one. A little bit hard work here, but that's fine. So we're gonna copy all of this here, okay, everything here, we put it here, we place that here, so we have 3 sums. Now, just put n3 here, plus n4, then n5, n6. Right? So if it was, now we did that, and then so now the numbers can be easily displayed here. You can change the number up here, doesn't matter what it is, and it all trickle down to those variable names. Okay, so if I run this now, you see that the sum are there. Okay. So now we're going to separate this out and put it into a subroutine. Okay, and I'll pass these numbers, all these numbers, to the subroutine, or any of those numbers to a subroutine, and then we'll do the summation. So if you look at this part is, and this part is the same. They're all identical. We're just adding those 2 numbers together. And so you could do something like this, because remember that subroutines and functions are used for the purpose of reusability. Okay, we reuse the code over and over again, so you don't have to type every time. So the sub procedure is the same as function. You put the word sub here and the name of that subroutine, and we're going to call this one here show sum. Okay, and then we'll put the parentheses there. And notice we're not going to put the as data type. Okay, this is not required because it's not a function. So subroutines do not return anything. It's just you gave some data, or you call it, and it would do something for you, and then that's done. So you think of a subroutine as like you give it a command to somebody to do something, and you're not expecting that person to give something back to you, right? So, for example, a function would be like what? I say, Omar, here's $1. Can you go get me a soda from the store? Okay, I'm asking you to do something, so that's a function because I'm expecting to get a soda back, right? So you return that data back to me. But if I say, hey, Omar, here's $10. Do whatever you want, right? Yeah, so I don't expect you to return anything back, so that's a subroutine. Okay, so those two analogies, hopefully they make sense. So in this case, I just say, hey, sum, here are my 2 numbers, or over here are my 6 numbers. Show those 3 sums and then display it. Okay, so I could do this. I'm going to say everything here, I just leave that there, everything here. Okay, I copy all of these here, or cut it out, and then put it inside the sum here. Okay, so this is because it does the summation and then the display and so forth. So actually, this part is the calculation part. You could put that into a function to do the calculation, and then you will display just the result. Okay, so well, maybe let's undo this. I'm going to change. Sorry. Let's just say that just this part, because this is the output. Okay, so display sum. That's all we do. So let's cut that out and put it in here. So we do the calculation here, and then we'll basically just show the sum. But notice on here we need to get these numbers out in the 1 and 2 through and 6. So remember, a subroutine here, this is a subroutine, they're all completely separate, so they have their own local variables and they're independent of each other. So that's why this one, show sum, cannot just use these numbers or these variables directly. To use this number, you have to pass these numbers to the show sum method or this subroutine. So this one here, I need everything you see in red here needs to be passed down to the show sum. So that means that I need in here the n1 as integer, okay, n2 as integer. You see the list gets very long here. N3 as well as integer, N4 as integer, N5, you need all of them as integer, okay, N6 as integer. Also need the sums, right? Sum 1 as integer, sum 2 as integer, and then sum 3 as integer. So you need to get all of them in there to make it work. So that is a pretty long list, and in this example is maybe a bad example because it's not very efficient, and we'll break it down to make something more efficient. Okay, so so now to show this sum, if you look at this, there's no more errors, right? Everybody's happy. It's all green over here, green, all good. And if you run this, you see that nothing gets displayed. Okay, there's no error, no nothing there. It still does. When you click show, it does still the calculation and there, and then so on. We're done here. So there's no way of getting to the show sum. To get that there, so you click the button. It calls this subroutine. It does the declaration here. It does the sum, does the calculation, and then we're done. It's not going to go and automatically jump to the show sum. To do that, you have to call it, okay, from another subroutine here. To reach out to this subroutine, you have to call it right here. So before we have to output here, right? So this the same place, show sum here. As soon as you type the name of the subroutine, you see that it shows you a list of all these n1, n2, n3 all the way to the sum 3. That means you have to supply all those parameters with those data. So we just list them: n1, n2, n3, n4, n5, n6, sum 1, sum 2, and the sum 3. Pass everything to that subroutine, and the subroutine will print that out or display that to the screen. Okay, so we replace these 3 lines here with this single line to call this subroutine, but then we have to pass all those variables over to have it shown. So you make one call, and then we show 3 of them at one time. Okay, so if you save this now and run the application, you see that it should still work just like before, right? If I click it again, it keeps adding to the bottom of that list. Because we're not clearing that list, we could clear it first before we add it, but it keeps going down the list. So really, you should do is that right before you add it right in here, and when you call this show sum, the first thing you should do is you want to clear it first. So you can say lst output.items.clear. Okay, that will clear everything in the list, and then so it doesn't keep adding to the list. Only show 3 of them. Right, so by doing that, if I click now, I only show those 3. Okay, so that may or may not be useful. If you want to keep a list of all the things you submitted, then you don't want to use the clear. So you have that option there. Okay, so what if you want to call it? So like, okay, let me just take this out for now again, just to show you what that is. It's coming up. Okay, so if I click one time, it calls it one time only. It shows the 3 sums down here. If I click it again, it shows the second set, right? Click again, shows the third set, and so on. What if I click it one time and want to show 2 times? Okay, it's like you click 2 times. So here I could just copy this and put it here. It now displays 2 times. So I get 6 lines when they click the button once. Okay, so that's why you can call this show sum as many times as you want anywhere in your code. Anywhere meaning inside another subroutine or function. So now if I run this, you see that when I click the submit, show 3 sums, it does it twice because I call it twice. The first time it does these 3 lines. The second call does the same, but it's a separate line of code, and so on, right? Okay. So you can see that this is not efficient because what that means, okay, hey, I can call it 3 times. What about if I do another one, right? I call it 3 times. Each time shows 3 lines. It's a lot of work. So you can say, you know what, I could do better. What if, because this is similar, this is all similar. What if you just do like, what if you just do this? Okay, what if you just do that? I'm just passing the 1 and 2, and then I'll keep just the sum. I don't need the rest, right? And 1 and 2 and the sum 1. I could just call this just sum instead of sum 1. Doesn't matter. Okay. So if I do that, then now I just have to supply the first one will be n1, n2, and the sum 1. Right? I don't need the other 3. So if we do this, take this out, so you can see that's much shorter now. Okay, only thing is, when you run this, you only get the first sum, right? What about the sum 2 and sum 3? How do you get that to display here when you click the show button? So all you have to do is now, I can do this again, copy this 2 times, and you pass a different number in here. N2 and N3, right? And then the sum 2. Got this part here. No, 3, 4, right? Yeah, 3 and the 4. The sum 3 is the 5 and 6. And this is sum 3. Okay, so I call this a subroutine 3 times, and this subroutine does, all it does is just output this message to the user. You can call this 100 times, 1,000 times, doesn't matter, but you don't have one subroutine to do that for you. So this way reusability, again, reusable code. Okay, so I don't just apply all these values. I just need 2. The reason why I need them because I'll put it here in the message. If I don't put that here, then all I need is the sum. Then that's all I need, just the sum. Okay. So if you run this now, you should see that it will look similar to what we had earlier. I'll put 3 times or 3 lines because we call those 3 subroutine 3 times. Okay. Are there any questions or completely lost or it's too easy? Let me know. That way there. Okay. So we're gonna. So if you remember last week, it's very similar to functions. It doesn't mean that I can't do calculations in here. I can. You can do the calculation if you want. That's fine. So I could put everything here inside the subroutine, could show sum, and then I just call it once, and that's fine too. What I mean is like this. So see this summation here is redundant, right? Instead of putting that here, I could say in here sum. This sum here. So in other words, if I do that, you can see how I modify this. Sum, if I do this, sum is equal to n1 plus n2, right? So if I can do that in the function here, then really I don't need to do all these here. I don't need that. I don't need this sum either. Right? And then I don't need this part here. I just need those 2 numbers. Right? And here I will dim this sum here. Dim sum as integer and then equals the n1 plus n2. And so now you can see it gets shorter. So if I completely remove these lines, you can see that the code gets really short. And because I don't need the sum anymore, I don't need this either. I just need my numbers. Okay, and then I call the sum to display the data, but inside the sum I do the calculation here as well, which may not be useful, but you can. I just show that you can do that as well. I'm not returning everything back. Okay, so if you run, you should still work just like before. Okay, so I do all the calculation inside the sum here. So now I'm going to do a very brief review on function, then we'll take a break. So see this part here? The sum is equal to n1 plus n2. Okay? So usually you don't do any calculation inside a subroutine. You can, but it's not that efficient. So anything that have to be calculated and returned back, you put to a function. Okay? So in here I could say, I'm going to break this out into a function that will calculate the sum and then send the total back. Okay? So here I will say outside I'm going to do a function add 2 numbers. Okay? What am I adding? Well, the first one's going to be n1 as integer, just like we have up here. Also want to add the n2 with the n2 as integer. I need 2 numbers. A function will return data. When the sum comes back, it's going to be an integer as well, so as the integer type. Okay, so that's the function. What am I doing? I'm adding just n1 plus n2. So I could just say return n1 plus n2. Very short function. Okay? And so now in here, instead of doing the calculation here, I want to assign this to the add 2 number. Add 2 numbers. And I need to specify 2 numbers. So the n1 and n2. So it's kind of we call up here, same thing, right? So I'm calling a function called add 2 numbers. It adds them up and then return the sum back to this location. So if it's 2, 2, they'll get 4. 4 assigns to sum, then I print the sum out. Okay? So function returns a data, that's why it returns to the right side as a number and you assign to something else. Subroutine, you don't call it this way. Subroutine has to always be on the left by itself. In other words, I cannot say, dim total, for example, total as integer is equal to sum, show sum. You cannot do that because subroutines do not return any value. Okay, so you say that it's not allowed. I'm just telling the show sum to do something and be done with it. So I'm not returning anything back, so therefore it cannot be on the right side of the equal sign. It cannot. Okay? Not only that, you cannot put inside an expression either. So like in here, if I want to output the sum, I cannot say lst output dot items dot add show sum. Okay, I cannot do that. Okay, because it's a function. It's not a function. It doesn't return any value. I put n1 and 2 here. Okay, so you cannot put it inside here as an expression. The total I can. I mean, the add two numbers I can put that in here. Add two numbers. Okay, and you add the 2 and 1 and 2 to it. You get a total back, which is a 7, and then it's just the same as saying add 7 to the list box. Okay, so function subroutine cannot be inside expression, and also cannot be on the right side of the equal sign. Okay, because it only outputs data, it doesn't return data. So I want to make sure that the distinction is understood between the two functions in subroutine. But when you declare it, it's very similar. If you compare this to this, right? Very similar. The differences are the keywords sub and function, and then the as data type at the end here for the function. In the inside here, notice the sub does not have a return statement. I cannot put in here it says return 5 or something, 3. Okay? It doesn't return anything, so you cannot put that in here. And the function, if I don't put that in here, then it says I need to return something. So it's the opposite of each other. So they kind of complement each other in this case. Okay? Any questions on how subroutines work? So you can pass data to a subroutine just like you did with the function, exactly the same way. You have to specify the data name, variable name, width of the dim, the data type, then you separate each parameter with a comma, just like down here. You can also have a show sum or another subroutine without any parameter. That's fine too if you don't pass any data to it. Okay, so let's take a 10-minute break and we'll come back and we'll continue on.